Edward, great to see you, and thank you so much for joining. We've known each other a long time. I think we first met 5 years ago when Zero Hash was a bit of a different business, didn't we?
It's been a long time, but in some ways feels like less time, but in some ways feels like more time, which is I think a good thing.
Absolutely. Well, look, thank you so much for joining us in our first session. This is the how to build remote teams, and obviously you've built an amazing business through tough markets, amazing markets. So why don't we start off with giving us, the elevator pitch? What does Zero Hash do?
Yeah, so Zero Hash, we call ourselves crypto as a service. So we are an API B2B2C business that enables any business to embed digital assets within their infrastructure. Our core view is that crypto is a technology, not an asset class. And so we service a huge range of types of companies. So for example, we service some of the largest payment groups in the world, such as Stripe. We service some of the largest brokerage and investment platforms, such as Tasty Trade. And then we also service some of the largest non-financial service brands as well. We're a global business. We have people globally. We are regulated globally. And we're about 170 people crisscrossing now 6 different continents. So that's what we do in a nutshell.
Amazing, amazing. And when we first met, you were very much, well, even though we're both British, I was in Colombia at the time, you were in Chicago, but you were very much a Chicago business. Tell us, why did you decide to make the basis of your people team remote?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think definitely COVID was part of the trigger. It obviously changed, I think, everyone's mentality to building businesses. But I think at its core, in terms of why we've kept doing that and why we've maintained the way that we build businesses, I think there's 2 to 3 core drivers. One is fundamentally, we don't believe that we can find the best talent for every single type of role that we have within 100 miles of Chicago.
Yeah.
Secondly, we run a 24/7, 365 business. It fundamentally is helpful to have people based in Australia. It is fundamentally helpful to have people based in Europe. And that makes a lot of sense for us as a business. Thirdly is we are a global business. We have entities based globally. It has been absolutely incredible to see how it changes conversations, for example, in Brazil, where we have over 50 people now, as we speak to Brazilian clients, the difference it makes to have a local presence. It shows commitment to the region. It shows commitment to the potential customers that you're talking to. And then fourthly, there's obviously a cost consideration, right?
Absolutely.
The return, the ability to employ incredible capital, incredible people who buy into a vision, who want to build something great, is, it just, in terms of a dollar basis, is just incredible. And so those have been the 4 core drivers that have allowed us, we think, to build more quickly, more efficiently, and kind of increase the velocity in the way that we've built the business.
Absolutely, and I think, testament to Zero Hash, it's such a multicultural business, and this is how businesses should look like, in this modern day, obviously accelerated by COVID, but being able to have a local person on the ground that can speak to the local market and have, that local touch is, I think has been an amazing asset to your business. I'm curious, did you get any pushback from your investors? Did you have to convince them? Obviously I know you were kind of one of the first movers in your industry, being based in Chicago, it's known as a financial hub. Did some of them say, look, we want to be based here, or were they quite open to it? What was their feedback?
Yeah, I think COVID definitely changed people's mindsets. But there's definitely biases. We obviously run a highly secure business. We're a cryptocurrency business. There's obviously biases in terms of how you think about that. You've really got to think through those challenges, and sometimes there are valid concerns. But for us, the positives have far outweighed any kind of negative. Obviously, we're still learning, right? The world has shifted from 2 years ago to where it is today. Being very intentional in terms of actually going to sometimes, doing local meetups has been very, very important to us.
And the happy hours. I know I've been to one of yours in London and also in Vegas.
Okay, so I mean these things are important. It definitely changes the dynamic. I sometimes say, look, people are the same, but Zoom, it can take a lot longer to get to know somebody. So one of the things that we have also instituted pretty recently was for senior level roles above VP, we will always meet that person in person as well, because you actually get that connectivity much more quickly. Zoom, it can maybe take 2 months to really unpack somebody, whereas in person, maybe a 2-hour dinner, you can really unpack that person in terms of what motivates them and other pieces, some of the softer skills.
Because if I may just comment on that, it's like a lot of people think you run a remote business, it doesn't mean you can't actually meet in person.
Exactly. I mean, that is the piece of it. I mean, we have digital nomads. I mean, people often think digital nomads are, young people in their 20s. I mean, we've got nomads across the entire spectrum of the company, which is actually really interesting. And then when they go to these places, they actually meet up. And what's been really great for me is seeing these kind of organic meetups with somebody halfway across the world, meeting up with somebody else halfway across the world. And what connects them is their shared goal and what they're trying to build, their shared motivation in terms of the people that we try to bring into the company. And you create these really great meetups. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Remote work does not equal never meeting these people in person.
Long distance relationship where you never see each other.
Relationship where you never actually meet in person. Yeah,
absolutely. Ed, so I think Zero Hash is a fine example. Obviously, we're in an interesting market, especially in crypto. You've not had layoffs. I know the business continues to grow. You've done some amazing partnerships. For example, with Stripe. However, keeping a team engaged, keeping the troops motivated, you can't just go for a coffee with them. So how have you done it? How have you managed to keep morale so high? And how do you keep Zero Hash, being this, formidable force in the market?
That's kind of you to say. I mean, by no means are we a perfect company and figured everything out. I mean, I think it's a testament to some of the people that we brought in. Our VP of People, routing, absolutely incredible. She actually worked for a remote company first, before us. So learned a lot of great lessons. I think the one thing I would say is absolute, when I say absolute transparency, I'm not talking about Ray Dalio's kind of, I'm telling you that I think you're...
It's called the meetings and
But I would say transparency both ways. So we run very active pulse surveys now. And I think the key is to say, look, we know we're not a perfect company. No company is perfect. Here's the feedback that we've had. We're taking it head on, and here's what we're doing better. And that creates that funnel that, okay, I will invest in giving feedback because that's better. And then also transparency down. We let every single person know in the company how much money we made last month. What does our runway look like? And I didn't do that with our first business. And the reason that we did it in this business, I think in part is because we are remote, is that the ability to kind of have this water cooler knowledge is much harder. So you have to be very intentional. Fundamentally, every single person who works here is a shareholder in the company. Whether or not you're a consultant legally or an employee legally makes no difference to the way that we view you. And obviously with additional services now in companies, we can now employ people as employees as well. But being very intentional and giving people that context so that they can make better decisions, because fundamentally my crossover with our Australian team is low, right? But then also one of the lessons that we've learned is being clear that when you are a remote first company, I think there's different types of remote companies, right? There may be remote companies that purely work US hours or America's hours. That is very different to us where we have people in Australia. And one of the pieces of feedback that I received was, you operate like a US business and we're in Australia. So small things that you hadn't thought about. So for example, we gave people national holidays that were US national holidays. Well, why do I want to celebrate Memorial Day if I'm in Australia?
Oh, absolutely.
Change this to be flex days. You can just literally use this day if you want to or not, and you can use it whenever you want.
Because that happened to us. Colombia and India are the countries with the most bank holidays. I think in July, there's even 2 bank holidays in 1 month. So we were like, right, we kind of have to run this a bit like a British business and a Colombian business. But then that's when you just you have to give your team autonomy. And you're going to say, you make the decision, by all means, have the public holidays, but we're going to make a business work here.
Exactly. And then, also additional things like when you do your all hands, right? we record all of our all hands so anybody can watch it around the world if they can't join, but being very intentional. And right now we do once a month. We will switch the time that we do it, and we'll do it 7 p.m. local my time, which is much more friendly for people in APAC. And showing that flexibility. So making sure that you do have this flexibility and you do ensure that you are including everybody has been an important learning for us.
Absolutely. So you mentioned with senior hires, you prefer to have dinner with them, when you start advancing. But I know that before COVID, when we started speaking, you were about 30 people. Today, you mentioned about 150 people. That's a lot of hiring. What has been kind of like the best interview process? So imagine we've tried many, but obviously, we've got one now. But what has been an amazing interview process for, let's say, mid-level hires that you don't necessarily meet in person?
Yeah, we'll always give a challenge, right? And it's a real world challenge. So it's not a hypothetical, and that's worked really, really well. Definitely what's been helpful is people bringing in people that they've worked with before has definitely been...
Network effect, absolutely, yeah.
And we've done things, we're still evolving, but we've kind of got what we call now level raisers. So we have in the company people that we consider to be founding team members, people who've been here relatively, I'm the founder, but there's people here that we would not be here without. And one of those people will interview, there's 9 or 10 of us now that are considered founding team members. One of those people will interview every single person. That's really a cultural interview more so than anything else. So that's worked well for us in terms of how we do it. And then I think fundamentally it's important that the way that you think about your senior leadership that's employing this mid-level hires is making sure that there is diversity in that. We have senior leadership now in every single region that we operate. If you don't have senior leadership in those regions, then effectively you aren't going to have that pool, and that's been really, really important for us as well.
Oh, amazing. And then this brings me to kind of like the final topic is diversity. I think companies, it's amazing that we have people all over the world, but in tech, there is a massive gap now for kind of more female leadership, people with disabilities. I know several companies, given remote work, people that have got disabilities that weren't able to go to the workplace have now got access to amazing jobs because they can work from home. Zero Hash, what sort of initiatives have you got to encourage diversity in the current workplace?
Yeah, look, I think we need to do more. And some of the initiatives that we've put into place. I mean, diversity is a broad spectrum of what do we mean by diversity. From a nationality perspective, we're incredibly diverse. We have 30 nationalities in the company. But by other metrics, we are not that diverse. And I think diversity also where matters as well, right? So if you have a lot of one type of person at say, a junior level, but not at a senior level, that impacts it. I think for us, what we try to be very clear on, both internally and externally, when we've used external recruiters is, and we've had this conversation, is ensuring the funnel is sufficiently diverse. We don't seek to necessarily optimize diversity in output. I think that's a metric. I think that's a result of not necessarily great inputs. So we actually measure a lot of inputs, because if you don't have a diversity in intake, you will never have diversity on outtake. Or if you do, then there's something that then people think, then there's something that's seriously off, right? So I think it's all about the intake mechanism that works and really focusing on that piece of the puzzle versus, okay, this is the company that we are today.
Absolutely. And I think, as founders as well, you have to take initiative, and you've got to build HR policies around it as well, proper maternity, policies, etc. But Ed, I think we're done for time, but I wanted to obviously thank you, for joining us today. I've also wanted to thank you for the support that you've given, remotely. And just to kind of, finish off, your opinion, is remote work here to stay? We've seen Meta, asking, employees to come back. What's your opinion on this?
I think it's 100% here to stay. I think there's going to be companies that will be more in office. There'll be others that are more remote. I mean, the more I talk to people that work in the company, Some of them, say, I will never go back to a non-remote role. And so you've got people that are true believers. I think sometimes the challenge is where you're stuck in the middle, right? And that creates a two-tier system sometimes. And so, again, I think what you said is very, very pertinent. Remote work does not equal never meeting people in person. And I think that is a true statement that people need to invest in that kind of piece.
No, it's true. Well, look, we'll end it here, and thank you so much for everything, and we continue to be a massive fan of Zero Hash.
Yeah, no, thank you, and thanks for the partnership.